In the early days, what worked for us is that as soon as we launched, we had very, very good initial traction. And sometimes it's very difficult to mistake good traction for absolutely great traction. And I think this point is super important because it all comes down, especially in the early days, to finding a very good product market fit. So when you have good product market fit, you think, then let me scale it up. But do they like you or do they absolutely love you? I would try and understand that, okay, if that small set of people love you, that's great. Then they can become repeat buyers. Then you also want to see that is the target group of people who identify with you, is that a large enough target market or not? So in our case, what happened is that because of my background, I'm a professional athlete. I played for India for numerous years. I had good initial connections within the sporting fraternity. So a lot of our early customers were professional athletes, guys who were representing India at the Olympics or they were on the national team. And these guys were like really, really serious athletes. And the products that we had catered to this very small niche of people, which is probably 1 to 2% of the elite of the elite. But as we began expanding our target addressable market and catering to a slightly broader base, we realized that the product base or the messaging did not resonate as well with a broader group. So we had to tweak some things. The learnings were probably that, especially early, just because you see good traction, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily very, very scalable, and that you want to be razor focused on who your early set of customers are and how that customer base can be expanded. And how can you leverage that initial customer base, find more people like that, and then take it forward from there. When we were designing our website, the first time you design it so that it looks pretty, it looks good, and it caters to your sensibilities. My sensibilities now cater to what the mass of the consumer base that we actually have is. You have a lot of inherent biases as a founder, and you don't necessarily want to go with something that just looks good. You want something that actually functions well as well. And I think that's something that's most important. So we had to make some changes to the business and we kind of redid everything. We really focused on the functionality aspect of it. How do we get customers to create an action with the least amount of friction? If a customer likes something, what is the shortest possible time they can select it and then go to checkout and have a multitude of different payment options in the least amount of clicks in the most intuitive manner? It's all about keeping it simple, keeping it functionally basic, instead of necessarily making it beautiful and pretty and something that could get a design award. Because see, at the end of the day, we're in the business of selling products and making it convenient for consumers to do that, not in the business of making it most beautiful. That also happens well. That's an added advantage. The second thing was that startup bias is that all of us were designing for desktop. And with the entire revolution, especially in a country like India, I would say that 95 to 97% of all our traffic comes from mobile users. So you have to be mobile first. You have to be designing mobile first. One of the good things is that in India, the direct-to-consumer businesses are not too many. It's growing, but there's a small number. Since we're plugged into that ecosystem, there's a good respect and good sharing amongst founders. And even being part of Fireside and being part of a few other places, there's a lot of knowledge spillover that happens, chatting with other founders, chatting with ecosystem, who are quite open to sharing certain best practices. Right? At the end of the day, look, there's tons of advice available, but you have to trust your own instinct and you have to think in terms of first principles. Does this fit into our business model or not? Does it make sense? So logistics, the prevailing wisdom was that work with aggregators, have direct contacts with the courier partners until you're a particular scale. In our case, that's not something that worked for us because we used to transport packages which were volumetrically almost 3 to 4 kgs. So unless we actually went to our logistics partners, sat down with the relevant account managers, showed them a package, told them we're standardizing the entire process and we're guaranteeing X amount of volumes, and you come up with something a bit more favorable to us. If we hadn't taken the pain to do that, the direct-to-consumer channel would have never taken off because the logistics costs would just be way, way, way too high. So you've got to see whether the prevailing wisdom aligns with what you're trying to do. So that's the first part. The second part is that also because the ecosystem is very young, what you have is a lot of other young startup entrepreneurs who are creating solutions in this space. So when it comes to marketing automation, when it comes to analytics platforms, There's a bunch of these partner ecosystems. We're quite open to experimenting with these younger companies because so far we have not gone into developing the tech solutions in-house ourselves, even though we have a pretty good in-house tech team. And I understand tech myself quite a bit, but we've shied away from actually creating our own tech. We're talking specifically about the direct-to-consumer channel. The first hire we made was a general marketing person. We do a ton of things because especially when you're small, you are not sure which traction channel is going to work for you. You're not sure about your communication. You're not sure about your target audience. And I think if you get too specific earlier on, prior to finding product market fit, it's almost like this tunnel vision thing. And that's not the most effective way to do it. So in our case, it was a general marketing guy who could dabble in multiple things, like set up your email marketing channels, set up your basic marketing automation, get certain campaigns running on Facebook and Google, setting up your funnels, seeing what's working, and then delving deeper into it. So I think if I had to go back again, one thing we didn't do, we didn't invest in somebody's brand, or I would say just invest in brand from the word go. Because you may not see the dividends in the first week, the first month, even the first year, but you kind of stay with it. And if you just keep kind of building, keep putting one brick on top of the other, and suddenly you have a wall. And branding is a bit like that. It's cumulative efforts on many small things. The D2C channel is your own personal ability to tell your story to the customer in a very one-on-one manner. And as a customer, especially in today's day and age, products are commoditized. There is nothing that can't be copied. There is nothing that can't be emulated. But if your story is something that really connects with a core group of people, the reasons why you're doing it, your processes, how did you build it, what do you stand for, what are your values? So if people begin to connect with you on those levels, you're selling more than a product. You're selling an experience. And that is something that's very kind of disruptive. I think having that D2C channel gives you that ability to authentically communicate your story. And I would say that's the biggest pro, really. You get your customer data, you can be authentic in the way you talk to them, you can kind of retarget them, you can customize and personalize their behaviors to your shopping experience. And with the plethora of tools around today, it's easier than ever to. What's kind of negative, what's kind of a con, is that it requires investment. It's something that requires investment of time and money, really getting it set up. Because look, it's a lot easier to go to an Amazon, to go to a Flipkart, to go to a Myntra, put your products up. You already have a customer base over there. You do some marketing, you get sales. It's very easy to do. But then I think the question you got to ask is entering the commodity or people entering your brand name. You want to have multiple channels. In today's day and age, it's not like, are you online first or are you offline? Everybody's omni-channel. Everybody's where if you are not where the customer wants to be, then it's a problem. Somebody else is eating your lunch. So I would say that the online channel, it nicely complements all the other traction channels that you already have, and it allows you to connect with customers in an authentic, personalized, and customized manner. Look, hindsight is kind of 2020. One of the most crucial parts is with regards to the team. You want to make sure that the people around you are people you can go to war with to move the business up to the next level. One of the biggest learnings is that don't compromise your team. Get the right people on board, even if it means you're spending extra, you're giving up more equity, whatever it is. Because if they're the right people, they're going to contribute to the company more than you can ever imagine. So the first thing is get the right people on the bus. And don't be ultra frugal about it. Take care of them. And sometimes, despite the best interviews, all the best ref checks, things will still go wrong. But when they do go wrong, don't hesitate to have those difficult conversations, because what happens is that in a very short amount of time, is it working or is it not working? As founders, again, we're super optimistic, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And the reason you're a founder is because you have to make those uncomfortable and hard decisions. And if you didn't want to do it, then you should be a founder. The second thing comes down to raising money. Oh, should I raise right now? I only have 9 months of runway. And if I increase my revenue a bit more, I'll reduce my dilution and stuff like that. So again, it comes back to the same point that founders sometimes are like super optimistic. Anything can go wrong. COVID could happen, demonetization could happen, 20 things could go wrong. Make sure you have a solid ground on which you're standing. Don't drink your own tea. It can be quite nice sometimes, but it can come to bite you. Look, I've made all these mistakes myself, and probably if I had to do this all over again, I'd probably make the same mistakes again. It's very easy to talk about it, but when you're actually in the thick of things, it's quite difficult to implement. The final thing is that a lot of your success is going to be determined on what market you choose. So spend a lot of time really, really thinking about, is this market big enough to build a large business? Because it doesn't matter how good your product is or how good your marketing is. If the target market itself is small, you're just not going to build a big business. As a founder, one of the things is that you've got to be adaptable. It comes back to what Darwin said. So it's not the strongest of species that survive, it's the one most adaptable to change. You can't fall in love with your idea. You've got to fall in love with the idea of succeeding. I can't be like, oh, I'm into performance wear and that's what I wanted. I think we went back to first principles and saying, why did we start the business? So I was an athlete. The thought behind that was that ordinary people also have their own struggles. They want to train harder, train longer, recover faster, prevent injuries. And how can we enable them to do that? Because it's not only pro athletes who have the struggles, even ordinary people are trying to get better. So we said that how can we, during this pandemic time, what can we do to make ordinary people's lives better? How can we enhance their lives? What are certain products that we can create? We went back to our customer base. We tried to understand the pain points, and that's how we made the pivot to nutrition. So yeah, still have what if moments. So then you have to kick yourself out of it, and you have to be like pragmatic and say, okay, this is the new reality, and how do we make the most of it? I don't think you have time to feel sorry for yourself or get down on yourself. You're responsible to your team. You're responsible to your stakeholders, and you just have to adapt and survive. There are going to be more black swan events. How do we make ourselves anti-fragile to these things moving forward? So yeah, that's broadly how we think about it.